Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Andor Season 2, Episodes 4, 5, and 6. So, ever been to Gorman? I have friends everywhere, and what a festive evening. So, yeah, Arc 2 of 4, we're getting into the second half of the series starting next week. Overall, I once again enjoyed the batch of 3 episodes, but I did feel like this was particularly a kind of setup group of episodes. It was very clearly that this was the sort of build up, a lot of the stuff in place ahead of the Gorman massacre, but it hasn't actually happened yet, so I'm assuming that's what next arc is, because unless they're going to make this the absolute focus and like the Gorman massacre happens in the last arc, but I kind of have a feeling that they'll do Gorman next week and then the last arc will be sort of leading directly into Rogue One. But we'll see what exactly happens. Anyway, back to this arc though. Yeah, just the sense that this one, it felt a little bit more on the setup side of things, that like it was 3 episodes, nearly 3 hours of content, and while they explored quite a few things in a nice amount of detail, and it is necessary setup, I think, for when we actually get the big Gorman massacre, that they did this stuff ahead of time. I did feel that coming out of it, that there's maybe not as much stuff that I want to talk about as maybe some of the other arcs in Andor. That a lot of this stuff, like once you get to the end, was like, okay, there was some nice stuff here, but it's not the most like fascinating content that we've maybe ever had before. But there's still some great scenes consistently throughout all 3 of these episodes, which I do want to talk about. It was a little bit more scattered in the sense that, like, I still feel like, and again, it was purposeful. Andor has yet to maybe properly jump into the spotlight, given that he is the main character, title character of the series. But it did feel like the final scene was sort of, Andor and Bix are now back in action, and they're probably going to play a really big, more active role in the last 2 arcs. So we finally kind of got there, but I will say some of their stuff here still felt like we're kind of still getting reintroduced kind of back into them. This is the setup to get them back into play arc style thing. We had some stuff with Saw here, which I thought was nice enough, but again, it wasn't like hugely focused upon to the point where sometimes it felt like a little bit random when we went back there. Again, I think I get what they were going for here, but there was that. Mon Mothma was not as much in focus this time out compared to other ones. So like there's a sense where it just feels like, okay, so like our focus was very much on the introduction and focus on Gorman with the various characters doing things there. In that, to a certain degree, I think you'd say like the Cyril plot across the episodes, which kind of transitioned then into like actually dealing with the rebels on Gorman, was sort of the main plot. But then also kind of Clea jumped a little bit more into the spotlight with what her plot was with the kind of Luthen stuff. So a lot of stuff happening here with a lot of the characters. So maybe just a little bit of a sense that this one took a lot of time to maybe cover like a smallish amount of content, but good and necessary, kind of required, because the stuff is going to be more impactful going into the future overall. So I don't really have a major criticism with these episodes. It's just, that's kind of my thoughts, is that I don't think I'll have as much to say about some of these arcs here, because it was a little bit more on the setup side of things compared to, I think, most of the other arcs where they have more of a kind of clear sense where like, this is the arc where this stuff happens. But yeah, let's get into it here. So we'll start off with Cassian and Bix. So like I said, they're kept on the kind of sidelines a little bit here, where Cassian is given a mission in this episode, but it's pretty small scale. It's purposefully said that, like, oh yeah, you'll only be gone for like a day, basically. We just want you to basically check out Gorman, the Gorman front, and report back on if you think basically it should be part of the Rebel Alliance, or are they just nowhere, not where they need to be. Beyond that, they do focus on the kind of more kind of human aspect of just kind of Cassian and Bix trying to be kind of maybe more normal while still being operatives for Luthen on like Coruscant, but like trying to get back to live a somewhat normal life. And in the same way that you can see Mon and Luthen are kind of struggling with the double life, it's sort of the same for Cassian and Bix, where Cassian, especially as someone who's developed into a very reliable operative, is very cautious of cameras. We can't go to this shop because of this reason. You can't go to the park nearby because there's cameras there. We can't have any of this stuff happening because they highlight that an incident that happened in the time jump that we went through was that an Imperial officer sort of focused on them a little bit too much and seemed to kind of recognize them, so they had to deal with him. They had to kill him. And this has sort of traumatized Bix a little bit more. And this is another thing that she kind of is struggling with. So that was kind of interesting to see, where I suppose Andor is also being put into a position where he has to make the decision of like, are we stepping away or are we going all in on the rebellion? And for that, they kind of need Bix to be back in action. Andor doesn't want to rush her, but kind of Luthen kind of does want to get her back into play. Otherwise, she's a liability to the Rebel Alliance. And you're starting to see like Luthen on in terms of how he interacted with this part of the arc. You very much see that Luthen's beginning to lose it a little bit himself, where the people he's working with, he's beginning to not really treat them like people that he cares about them, that this is the ultimate goal, is to defeat the Empire so people can live their lives in the right way kind of going forward. But what they're almost required to do to keep this up in the current state of the rebellion is causing him to become frustrated, because he's dealing with a lot of information. Like the Empire is struggling with the amount of information that they have to do, and they have this huge system. Luthen is like one of the main leaders, but it's only like him, Clea, and a couple of scattered people that aren't even organized very well, and they're struggling. So you can see the issue kind of throughout, but also that he's beginning to lean more on the kind of extreme side of things, whereas he was kind of against that a little bit more in the first season. He's wanting Lonnie to kind of rush. Don't play it safe. We need the information. I need the end game. Do what you need to do. We can't play it safe anymore. It's not about that. He's kind of more quickly ready to give up on people and maybe eliminate them if they become a nuisance to his cause, the cause as he calls it. And then of course, like when we come to the end, Cassian basically thinks like, no, the Gormans, they're too eager, they're too much of like rookies basically at this. I don't think it's a good idea to get them involved. But Luthen does want to get them involved, and it's he questions Cassian in the idea that like, you care about the people who are close to you, but like, can you not bring yourself to care about the kind of bigger picture? And he's going to have to do that. But Luthen is beginning to do the other thing, where he's more focused on the big picture and not on the people that gets you to kind of this part. And I think especially the fact that he basically says like, they discuss, what if Gorman burns in all of this? Like, we bring them in, and what if actively supporting a rebellion on Gorman gets Gorman got, and they go down for this because of the Empire? Luthen's kind of like, well, it'll be a big kind of signal fire that everyone will see. It will go up in a big way, and it will help the cause, basically. He's willing to sacrifice Gorman to see what the impact is from everyone else, when it will be pretty clear what the Empire have done, I guess. And that was a big like, oh, this is what we're doing here kind of style moment. And of course then you have the idea like Andor goes on the mission. This is when Luthen goes to visit Bix on his own, and Andor's kind of frustrated about this, and he has some kind of choices to make. Now it does seem like they're back in play at the end, where we kind of resolve some of these kind of issues as we go forward, where Bix seems to be back in play as an active kind of operative. She takes out Gorst, who is the guy who tortured her the previous season, and she kills someone else on the way out, and she's with Cassian. And okay, so she seems to have had this kind of flip almost from worried about what they have to do these missions to. Oh no, she's back in action, but is she maybe now a little bit too eager to kill, and this is how she's dealing with it? Because they did highlight that Bix seems to have developed a bit of a drug problem, and has she maybe swapped that out for the violence is maybe the focus for her? Because to a certain degree, like, I think we're all going into the remaining episodes thinking that, well, doesn't Andor basically have to lose, like, everyone close to him coming up? Where, like, Luthen's probably going to go down at some point. Bix, I'm assuming Willman, kind of thanks to Saw, is probably going to get taken out at some point. Highlighting why Andor is the way he is at the start of Rogue One. And we've not quite seen that yet, even though there's been bits and pieces. Like, he's lost Brasso, and so on. So that's that. Definitely, I'm eager to see what they do with Andor when he finally steps up properly into the spotlight. I think more in an arc. I suppose leaning into Luthen a little bit more on the other side of things. Of course, he sends Andor on the mission. Otherwise, this is more given to kind of Clea here. Like, there is still Luthen scenes kind of on this side of the arc, but it is more of a kind of Clea plot where she realizes that one of the bugs they planted on Skulden's artifacts will probably be found, because he's doing a big deep inspection on them, because one of his things is a forgery. So they could be outed here. And this kind of highlights how delicate the operation is. That if they go down, like, it's not just the rebellion has lost 2 key people. This is like half the rebellion gone. Like, this is most of the leadership gone if they go down. So that's why it's so important that they fix this relatively small issue that could destroy everything. So it's all at the party. They have to build up to this. There is an interesting discussion between the two prior to this, where this is where kind of Luthen loses it over too much information, kind of shortly after the scene with Lonnie, where Lonnie hasn't given him all the information he wants. He has an idea that Dedra's involved with the whole Gorman thing, so Gorman's important in some way, but why? What's the end game? He doesn't know, and they're not getting the information. But also that they have so many leads on this could be a thing, but not knowing where it's all going. So he doesn't know where to place the resources, and he's struggling with that, and he kind of takes it out on her to a certain degree. But this is what they have to do to survive. Otherwise, they have to kind of prepare for the end, is sort of the idea. So he helps kind of, I suppose, with some of the distractions, just, you know, going around talking to people. It's mainly helpful that Mon Mothma is there to argue with Krennic to kind of hold up some of the quickly going through a lot of the artifacts. So she kind of gets a scene with kind of Lonnie, where she kind of has to flirt with him and use him as a bit of a distraction while she kind of unscrews the bug from underneath one of the things. It's a tense scene. They maybe focused on it a little bit too much, considering that it was just kind of unscrewing something. But again, because of the idea of, like, if they were caught, like, this is the rebellion kind of gone type thing. Like, it's an incredible kind of scene in the sense that it's like this could have completely undermined, like, the rebellion that we know it to be, just with this thing not being unscrewed in time. So there was a kind of interesting kind of factor to it there. But yeah, it'll be interesting to where they go with kind of Luthen from here on out. Like, is he going to end up being even more extreme, not seeing the kind of humanity in the situation maybe anymore, and just doing what needs to be done, that extreme route? Where might he be like, actually, Saw is exactly what we need at this point in time because he gets stuff done? That'll be interesting. But yeah, speaking of Saw, this is where what they kind of do with Willman kind of going forward. He goes to help Saw, mainly as sort of like a tech expert, and like he's just meant to be there for the day, teach some stuff, and then leave. But because Saw is Saw, he kind of keeps him on board and basically uses him to weed out who the traitor is in his midst, and it is Pluty, the guy he's training. So he does that, has Willman do the job, which is using the kind of fuel extractor to get the Rhydonium out. We obviously highlight that Saw, part of why he is the way he is that he's kind of addicted to Rhydonium, and maybe a lot of his people have done some of this stuff as well. there is some kind of crazy dialogue from him that kind of is interesting in terms of the references, like him referring to the Rhydonium as his sister, um, kind of referencing kind of Stela. He talked about like the jungles of Onderon and stuff like that. Um, that's an interesting kind of call out. What they seem to be going for is that Willman was kind of, I think, for the most of the episode, doing a good job at kind of not listening to the extreme views of Saw and just stay on target, like stay on business. But it seems like Saw got through to him in the end. So when he took off the kind of rebreather mask and he kind of inhaled some of the Rhydonium, it was meant to be this moment of like, ooh, has Saw and the kind of extreme kind of aspect of things got to Willman, because he's like what lost his father to a certain because of what happened in like the previous arc, because he had to leave, he lost his kind of, I guess, first love. You can sort of see that kind of maybe the arc they're going for here, and now he's maybe one of Saw's crew here, and so when we see him again, is he going to be full on the kind of extreme rebel end of things? And again, are we expecting him to get killed off as well, and this to be another thing that adds to what's happening with Andor? But they didn't really overly highlight, like, other than character work, is there a significance to this mission that Saw is on compared to anything else? But I'm not really sure. So that's that side of things. Otherwise, everything else is the Gorman stuff. So, yeah, let's get into this, because Andor is going to come back into this as well. This is where we get the Cyril and Dedra stuff. But yeah, we do get to go to Gorman. We got a whole kind of video on it before. Now we get to see it here, and it's kind of Star Warsy French style language that they kind of, I think, made up here for this. That's clearly the inspiration. And yeah, we learn a few things here. There's actually some nice exploration here where we get details like, hey, there was a previous incident on the planet, the Tarkin massacre, which happened quite a few years ago, much earlier on in the Empire kind of time period. We're still building up to the Gorman massacre, which is a much bigger event. But Gorman has this history of issue with the Empire dating back to this event, which was, as we get it described, Tarkin came to land out in the plaza in like a cruiser, and he just landed the cruiser on protesters below, killing like 500 people because they wouldn't move out of the way. That's a crazy thing. Like, I understand why they didn't show that, but wow, that would have been a like wild thing to see in Star Wars. But I'm guessing they didn't show it because they want to show the actual Gorman massacre happening, and that's going to be the big thing. That is the visceral, visual, yikes, the Rebel Alliance needs to take out the Empire kind of moment in the series. But still, I like the way they explored that, because they had they mentioned it in different ways, like 2 or 3 times across the episode, before Andor undercover gets it from the guy in his hotel room, and that you get the more detailed explanation of it. So that's kind of nice. And I believe it's also like as a continuity thing. This is tying in, I think this event was like a Legends event, but now they're making it sort of canon, but that also the canonical Gorman massacre is something we're going to see, and they're separated by like 16, 17, 18 years. So that was interesting. But this is part of why they're so angry this time out, because the Empire wants to build this armory, but it's infringing upon the monument to the fallen from the previous incident. And this is adding to it, in addition to the fact that the Empire, because they're trying to frustrate the Gormans to ferment a rebellion basically themselves, but they're in control of it, it's affecting production on what Gorman is known for, with the spiders and the fabric effectively that they make here. And that was interesting, because you can see that they've implemented like most of the strategy they talked about in like the previous arc, where there is a propaganda campaign against Gorman, because that was the point of the scene with Cyril and his mother talking at the start, was that it was Cyril, because he knows there's a wiretap on him. he's acting like he's defending the people against the propaganda campaign of the Empire, whereas his mother's kind of read into it the whole time. The twist, though, on the Cyril plot is that you go for, I think, quite a few of the episodes not maybe fully knowing, like, how in on this is he? Is he being used? Is he completely oblivious to it? But actually, it's that no, he knows pretty much everything. The only thing he doesn't know, and the only way he's probably being used, is that the Empire is not telling him what they're ultimately hoping to gain from the success of his mission. That he thinks he's helping the Empire by, facilitating the rebellion happening initially on Gorman, so that they know exactly what's happening and can kind of put it down quite quickly. So from his perspective of like the Empire is this good force in the galaxy, this is an effective way to stop a group of terrorists before they become a major threat. Not realizing that the Empire actually wants this to happen so that they can basically come in and massacre the entire planet without really caring about them. And what's so interesting about it is that I think this is the key thing, I guess, with the Cyril Dedra dynamic, is that they're both loyal to the Empire, but in kind of different ways. Cyril has more of a sense of like, this is the right thing to do, but he actually supports the Empire. So if he was to find out the truth of what he's kind of helping to facilitate here, you can actually see him having this massive crisis and not just, digging his heels in as being loyal to the Empire. Whereas, of course, Dedra, she's high up in the Empire. She knows what's happening here. She's loyal and is going ahead with this. And so it's just that idea of any sense of sympathy you have for her because some of the character dynamic stuff is good, and you realize, like, oh no, she's fully aware of what she's doing as part of this and doesn't seem to have any qualms whatsoever about facilitating what she's about to facilitate, basically. We still have to see, I suppose, the full details about, like, what exactly do they do to the point where this becomes, like, a massacre. Because they did seem to be talking about it in a way where, like, how do we, like, relocate the population rather than, like, they just kill everyone. But have they settled maybe on that as the way to do it? And I think it's telling that they do have the discussion about, you need to make sure Cyril never knows what the full reasoning behind what we're doing this is for. And she's all on board with that. And it's so interesting because I think as a viewer, you're kind of like, you kind of like the Cyril Dedra relationship, but then you realize, like, oh yeah, Dedra's high up in the Empire. Yeah. Because they did play with the idea of the year has passed and initially it looks like things have changed in this kind of weird way where, like, oh, Cyril and Dedra have broken up, and Dedra has actually been, like, not demoted, but, like, she's being taken away from the important missions and just put on this random stuff. But no, actually, it's meant to look that way because this is top secret. Like, no one can know that they're doing this because they are effectively, masterminding, kind of killing a population type thing. So I'm very interested to see, like, what happens next with them in terms of, like, how much are they just directly planning, like, to kill everyone, or do things go wrong and they're really forced to make it bigger than it was maybe ever meant to be. That's what could be fascinating to see in the upcoming stuff. But yeah, it is cool to see Cyril be the double, triple agent kind of type thing. Like he actually does a good job kind of acting in the right way overall, because he is capable, but, like, he also knows how to kind of, like, be the more, like, oh, I don't know what's going on type character. So he perfectly sends out the right impression to the Gormans as someone that they can get on their side who works for the Empire. And so they bring him in, they use him to get the information that they need to plan their first big kind of counterinsurgency, basically, against the Empire. But of course, this is all being fed to them. The Empire wants an incident to happen so that they can look like the good guys coming in and putting down the they shot first type thing, which is the truth. That's what Cyril is able to report here, is that the first people to fire a shot was the kind of rebels against themselves, not the Empire against Gorman. So they kind of have that on file. And that's what's so interesting about it, is that the episode ends with them being like, oh yeah, go in hot. But we don't see what actually happens. So I'm kind of like, there's no way the Gorman massacre is just happening off screen. This I'm guessing is the first thing of like, they're going to come in, lay down the law, and set up shop a little bit more, so that when something bigger happens, they force the Gorman Front into doing something bigger that will set off a massacre. I'm guessing that's the way they'll do it, but it was an interesting choice to end the episode in that way, where you don't really see what the Empire's response necessarily was to it happening. But what's good in this section of the episode is that you see the idea of they're trying to make it a serious rebel cell, but you see that they are kind of inexperienced. There is a lot of, why should we trust you? We're doing this ourselves. But like, do you have any experience doing this? No, but still, you want us to take orders from you? There was a little bit of that going on. Definitely Andor maybe went in expecting them to be perfect, even when he wasn't early on in some of his missions. But you can see that Luthen obviously sees something in it, so this is where Vel and Cinta are actually the ones sent to facilitate the heist that they're going to do here. So that was an interesting kind of inclusion of those characters. And speaking of Vel, this actually led to, I think, from the Luthen character point of view, one of the better dialogue scenes in the episode, of Mon asking, like, hey, what's going on with, like, my cousin, Vel? And he's like, wait, what do you want to know? And he's acting all suspicious, like, why on earth would you want to know what's going on, like, with one of my operatives? And she's just kind of like, she's my cousin. I care about her. Are you good? And there's just that sense of like, he's a bit too locked in on the cause and not like realizing that people care about other people. That's like the fundamental thing you're meant to have in all of this. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, it seems like there's potential in the Gorman Front, but they're maybe a little bit too eager. They don't fully listen. There's a bit of a sense where, some of the younger members are like, these outsiders, why should we listen to them? They do say only like Vel and Cinta are going to have blasters, but one of the guys brings one in, and that's what causes the issue in the end. Because otherwise, the plan actually seems to go off without a hitch. Now, admittedly, it's because none of them know that Cyril has been aware of this the whole time and is kind of working against them, and that the Empire is basically allowing this to go off, but aware the whole time that, like, yeah, we'll just respond to this, and this will be the first thing that allows us to kind of do what we need to do. But still, like, they seem to make it kind of go off quite nicely until issues within their own ranks of, like, the young guy tries to stop the angry guy from earlier on, kind of sticking his nose in where it doesn't belong. He pulls out his blaster, but he doesn't just kill the guy, because, he doesn't want to. He's not maybe ready for that. But then he causes more of an issue. The gun goes off, and Cinta is killed in the most, like, almost like random way possible, because it's an accidental shot where the timing of this had to be, like, perfect to hit anyone, let alone, like, basically your best operative in terms of, like, best fighter effectively that you have here, where she had gone back to kind of clean up some of the debris from, like, the charges they initially used to stop the thing they were stealing, and she just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time when the gun went off, and she's just immediately killed. It led to Vel having, I think, a very strong scene where um you sort of see like, oh, some of the members of the Gorman front are actually able to deal with the chaos like relatively well and get her back on track, but then that she doesn't immediately kind of go for revenge and instead kind of reads him the riot act for what he did. um and just making it clear that like you need to remember this for all time, that this is what you did, but like you can't just like say you're sorry and that's it done. Like you've got to be better than this going forward. So that's an interesting one, because I didn't call Cinta being the next death of like one of our kind of like notable characters in a way. So especially because they'd just done the romance reunion here in this, which I thought was actually quite nicely done. Given that it wasn't given like a crazy amount of time, just like one or two scenes, but it was done quite nicely. But then tragically taken away, of course. So yeah, the setup is very strong on Gorman. I'm guessing as we go into the next arc, Mon is going to come quite heavily into focus, to the point where like this has to be all on her, doesn't it? Like this really has to be it. Where I'm guessing they probably have to do her big speech forming the Rebel Alliance maybe at the end of episode 9, like end this arc with that, so we get one final arc of this show where like the Rebel Alliance is in place and it's more of a setup directly for Rogue One. Because some of the stuff with Mon in this was sort of highlighting that like, oh, look at all these events that she has to go to because there's so many new senators, I guess, because it's clear that the Imperial Senate doesn't mean anything anymore. It's just people who will never go against Palpatine, no matter how the information is presented to them. Like she presents the idea, we need to stop this. Giving the ISB too much power. Look at the amount of arrests there's been on certain planets. Like even on Gorman. Like Gorman has like a crazy arrest rate now. How does that make any sense? She wants to change things, but she can't do it at all through the official means. And if she wants to make any change, she has to do kind of what she's hesitated to do maybe all last season, all this season, and that is to, properly be a part of the Rebel Alliance. And it has to be that big thing of her stepping out as the leader of it. And again, we basically know it is kind of in a response to the Gorman massacre, but we have to see like what her specific personal circumstances are kind of in the lead up to that. She's mentioned Gorman a few times, of course, but what specifically is happening in all of this? That's the real question, because like we're past the whole Tay thing, and like they've had the wedding thing with her daughter. They seem to present the relationship with her husband like reasonably well here, so the question is sort of like, okay, like what changes for her when like she says that this is what she wants to do? Like, is her husband against this? Is he behind this? Like how much of a sacrifice kind of has to be made from her here? I'm guessing one of the things that's going to happen is, I'm guessing maybe the death of Vel is the kind of inciting incident that makes Mon go, I need to be there so something like that doesn't happen again. I'm guessing. But and also I guess if something happens to Luthen, or she's aware that like the Rebel Alliance needs a leader that's not Luthen, she also needs to step up in her own way in kind of that regard. That if the Rebel Alliance is to mean anything at all, they have to stand for something better than just an alternate version of the Empire in terms of what they're willing to do, basically. So yeah, I'm excited for what's to come, and again, I did really enjoy these episodes. I just maybe came out of it feeling like I didn't have that as much to talk about overall. in terms of like really, really, really in-depth analysis. And I think part of that is just like, I do want to see like what exactly the details are surrounding the Gorman massacre and how it all pans out. And then it might make these episodes as the setup feel a bit stronger, knowing that, this is what they actually did, and the setup was here in these episodes to do that. I see what they're doing. But yeah, my guess is that there's huge things. Like the big focus is definitely on the second half of the season in terms of what actually happens. But yeah, let me know in the comments what your thoughts were on this group of episodes. What do you think the situation is with regards to how the next two arcs are going to play out? Is it Gorman Massacre and then like a Rogue One kind of prequel arc, or do you see it playing out sort of differently? Do they hold off on the Gorman Massacre until the next, until the final arc? Let me know below. But otherwise, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.